Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks perfect.
Perfect. So, as you said, I'm a researcher at the Technical University Berlin, but I'm also here to represent the flagship project TransHide. So I'm giving a short insight into the project and then go into the modeling and simulation of the transforming European gas transport infrastructure. So the TransHide project was created to have an exchange between science and industry, and the project goal was to analyze and evaluate the integration between the development of demand and the necessary expansion of the energy infrastructure in Europe. For that, we are 12 research institutes and 22 industry partners, with the aim of developing orientation knowledge for the design of the European hydrogen infrastructure. We've developed an integrated systemic approach for the development of the hydrogen and, of course, of the natural gas infrastructure. And there are a lot of points here which I won't mention in the presentation, but in the end, we've developed a roadmap which is online available on transide.de, right now only in German, but in the future also in English, with all the technology development sheets and also our infrastructure modeling results. Going now into the model coupling and our actual research. In the TransSide system analysis, we've first had the simulation of the energy demand in the industry, transport, and building sectors done by our partners from the Fraunhofer EV. Based on that, the cost optimization was carried out, modeling based on high-resolution wind and solar potentials. Then, based on that, the optimization of the electrolyzer locations and capacities was done with high spatial resolution to have specific locations for the electrolyzers. And then based on that, the actual modeling of the hydrogen transport network was done and the actual physical simulation of the hydrogen flows. And of course, we had also other models for specific topics like deeper into the specific electrolyzer structures or into hydrogen valleys, which is too much for today. So we've developed a lot of different scenarios. Here shown are 3 of our over 10 scenarios, which capture the bandwidth of future potential hydrogen demands, going from low demand to high demand in Europe, going from hydrogen demand only in high temperature process heating and power generation and some district heating, over to the mid demand with chemical feedstocks included and in high demand scenario hydrogen in all sectors, which might not be really realistic, but it just captures the bandwidth of possibilities. In the following, I'm focusing on the mid demand scenario as it's more realistic than the high demand and a little bit more optimistic than the low demand scenario. For the modeling of gas transport networks, it is necessary to have a systematic of network modeling. So we created a framework consisting of 3 different spheres. In the previous slides, I showed you the scenario data sphere, the modeling of it, where the demands for the different sectors and the production and the trade flows are modeled and optimized. And for us as network modelers, it's really relevant to temporally and spatially allocate these scenario-specific data to have, in the end, hourly demand and supply, of course, per location or NAT3 region for the whole of Europe. When this is done, based on that, topology can be generated because now we know where hydrogen is produced and where we need to bring it to. And based on that, you actually need a really good natural gas grid or network source as a base topology, because the goal is to repurpose a lot of the existing infrastructures. And based on this existing infrastructure, you can either use the Steiner tree algorithm or other models, or use like public plans, for example, in Germany, the hydrogen core network, to get a topology, to generate a topology. And if you generate hydrogen topologies for 2030 and 40, of course, you have to also look at the remaining natural gas network because it still has to function in the transitional years. After the topology is generated, of course, we have to flow validate it in the network simulation theory. And there we have the scenario data, which is location or NUTS3 region specific. We now have to put it on actual network nodes to be able to simulate it. The storage has to, a lot of storages have to be balanced because we're looking at individual hours of the years. For that, an hour clustering happens where we select really important network usage cases. The most important one most of the time is the peak load hour. The peak load describes the hour in which most of the re-electrification power units work to support our electricity system. And after that, after the balancing and network usage case selection, the active elements are configured, which are here mostly compressor stations. And then, of course, the fluid dynamic simulations are carried out. And in the end, we get hopefully flow verified network topologies and estimated costs for the infrastructure development and operation of the network. And if we find out that it doesn't work in our simulations, we have to go back to the previous two tiers and probably have manual additions to the topology or think about the scenario data again. So here some pictures for the scenario data theory. We used here for the mid-demand scenario, the year 2040 is shown, the spatial allocation for hydrogen. And below that, we have our natural gas 2025 database with up to 60,000 nodes in the network. A lot of nodes are not really relevant, but a lot of industry, power plant, storage locations are included. And then on the right side, you can see the hydrogen network for 2040 we've modeled with the nodal allocation for supply and demand. Green is the supply, of course, and demand is red. And we see the network usage case of the peak load hour, and therefore most of the green dots are import points or storages. So we don't see electrolyzer production in this specific hour. In our modeling, we found out that the key area for hydrogen demand in the future is going to be in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, as they are the industrial centers in Europe. So for 2030, we see that the hydrogen market is growing slowly, but really high and uncompetitive cost right now, and implementation gaps are jeopardizing the achievements for 2030. On the other side, in our modeling, we see for 2050 that a Europe-wide hydrogen transport network is essential to be cost efficient for transporting the produced hydrogen in Southern Europe and the North Sea to the industrial centers in the middle. Because the pipeline transport is, of course, the cheapest and most cost-efficient way to transport hydrogen. And therefore, we have a lot of risk in the infrastructure development because a lot of planning is based on outdated forecasts, and we have to adapt to the real demand and be faster in network planning and network adaptation. So we don't overinvestment and underutilize our planned and probably expensive infrastructure. So when we go now into the network topology sphere, we see again on the left side the base topology we used in our modeling, and on the right side the results for modeling with the Steiner tree algorithm. As you can see, the Steiner tree creates a minimum spanning tree on the right side, so the network is not really meshed, which is not a problem if the supply and demand is evenly distributed over the network, but of course it's not. So it's going to be problematic in fluid dynamic simulations in peak load hours where you have to transport a lot of hydrogen over small pipeline connections. For that, as you can see on the left side, we have a more meshed network. That's due to the fact that we did manual adjustments to the Steiner tree topology based on a divide and conquer approach. For that, we created subnetworks in our not mesh network, and there we solved them individually. So we detected bottlenecks and pressure drops in our smaller subnetworks, and then we added additional pipelines, either newly built or we looked in the remaining natural gas network to repurpose more pipelines. And then, of course, we fixed the smaller subnetworks, simulated altogether the whole European hydrogen network, And that was, of course, an iterative process. On the right side, you see the flow of hydrogen, the flow rates in the pipeline segments for 2040. And we can see the highest flows are happening in the Italian import corridor, as well in some North and Baltic Sea regions. As I said in the beginning, it's really relevant to also simulate or model at least the remaining or the residual natural gas network, as it's still 2040 in Europe, essential for the security of supply. And we can see here as well the peak load hour with a lot of demand from power plants and also from the industry still in 2040. And we can see that here, of course, most of the flow rates are due to the fact that the supply side is in the North Sea here. So coming to the results and conclusion part of the presentation. So we've developed in our project a high-resolution scenario-based modeling of the European hydrogen transport network infrastructure, also accounting for natural gas supply security during the transitional period. And by that, we developed a publicly available, fluid dynamically simulatable topology for also hydrogen and, of course, for the natural gas network, which can be downloaded online on our nemosis.de website, which is in the presentation via the QR code. We found out by 2040 that most of the hydrogen network can be repurposed. I think that's the highest share in the literature, which is due to the fact that we didn't implement a huge network in 2030 already, because then you also need most of the natural gas network still for natural gas. And if you start later with the expansion of the hydrogen network, you are able to be more cost efficient in the infrastructure transformation. And for that, we, as you have seen, we have an integrated co-simulation approach ensuring the technical and operational compatibility between both network and storage infrastructures. Yeah. So we have a publication upcoming with the same title as the presentation, which has a lot more information about the transitional periods and the different flows and the pipeline and infrastructure costs. So I was pretty fast, I think, so there might be time for questions. And I'm here to say thank you for the possibility to present the hydrogen flagship project Transide.
Thank you for this presentation. We have a question. So given the current regulatory gaps, how do the authors envision accelerating permitting, financing, and governance for cross-border hydrogen projects without jeopardizing market fairness or regional equity?
Oh, that's a big question.
Did you follow, or should I try, or can you maybe?
I found it in the questions part. I mean, there are some parts which are EU regulatory parts, which are the LFNBO regulatory to drive down the prices of hydrogen, of renewable hydrogen. So it doesn't need to be additional wind or PV power plants to produce the hydrogen, which is more costly. Also, the governance for cross-border hydrogen projects. There's some work ongoing on that as well from our side. Probably, which is always the solution, the government has to step in and maybe give some loans or some security on the investment projects of cross-border infrastructure projects. But right now, for example, between Germany and Denmark, there are already ongoing projects for cross-border infrastructure projects. And I think on the southern corridor with Italy, Austria, and Germany, there's as well a lot of backing from the governments. So I think there's going to be some progress there. I'm not sure how that jeopardizes the market fairness or regional equity. Of course, there should be a European perspective on that, but that's also, I think, implemented in the IPCEI projects, infrastructure development projects on a European level. That's kind of a broad or not really specific answer.
No, a very broad question as well. So thanks a lot. There is one more question in the chat. And I mean, we have time, so maybe if you're fine, we can take it as well. Now you got a lot of time. But then they ask, how do you think of hydrogen clusters or valleys in driving early infrastructure deployment? And how should EU level planning frameworks adopt to that bottom-up dynamic?
So in the project, we had also some work done on hydrogen valleys and how they can develop in the meantime until they're connected to the broader European or the transport network on a European level. The EU level planning frameworks, maybe they should be so, like I think the biggest problem for hydrogen valleys is that they invest right now in electrolyzers and some distribution grid level systems that they might become stranded assets because the electrolyzers are not really cost efficient in a European market in the future because they're, for example, maybe in southern Germany, which is not the best location for hydrogen production. So they might have the fear to get stranded assets on their hydrogen production in this specific hydrogen valleys. And then I think the only way to foster this still on a European level would be I think that's also some subsidy level stuff to give them to guarantee them that their investment won't be a stranded asset. But that's kind of difficult. So no easy solution on that as well, sadly.
But thank you so much for